absolutely thrilled to be able to bring this event to you today and tomorrow. Before I talk about today, tomorrow morning we will start with a panel featuring some of our wonderful micro-entrepreneurs who are brought to us here by Emory Investment Group, which is a micro loan organization started here at Emory. And then we are lucky enough to have 7 alumni representing 6 wonderful ventures, and we will have alumni spotlights by them. Then we'll have lunch. Then we have a very cool, still sort of vague in my head, workshop on purpose and passion and developing your personal narrative. And following that, we will have the semifinal and the final rounds of the Pitch the Summit competition. So it's going to be a wonderful 2 days, starting with, I think, maybe the highlight, which is today. So I'm particularly happy that you're here right now. I would ask respectfully that we turn all technology off unless it is absolutely 1,000% necessary. You can't otherwise function, but laptops for sure away. Sign of respect for our wonderful speaker we have here today. I will be hosting as a correspondent. I'm putting on my correspondent hat. We're going to have a fireside chat, but before we do that, I would very much like you to hear all of the wonderful credentials that our keynote has, Mr. Lanzone. And to do that for you, I'm going to call upon the president of the Emory Entrepreneurship and Venture Management Club, Aisha, if you would come on up and introduce the rest.
Thank you, Andrea. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here at the Summit keynote today. I want to take a few minutes to just introduce Mr. Lanzone to all of you. Jim Lanzone is the Chief Digital Officer of CBS Corporation and Chief Executive Officer of CBS Interactive. As Chief Digital Officer, Mr. Lanzone oversees all digital matters at CBS Corporation and ensures that the company has unified and innovative digital media strategy across its many divisions. This includes the cultivation and growth of new and existing digital streaming services.
Scoot in, what are you doing?
This includes the cultivation and growth of new and existing digital media streaming services, helping to shape where and how CBS industry-leading content is consumed and distributed. Mr. Lanzone is also the Chief Executive Officer of CBS Interactive. Since joining CBS Interactive in 2011, Mr. Lanzone has continually led the division to record financial and audience growth, while playing an integral role in CBS's overall multi-platform strategy. Under Mr. Lanzone's leadership, CBS Interactive's audience has more than doubled, making it a perennial top 10 internet property and the largest digital premium content group in the world. Mr. Lanzone has modernized content creation, distribution, and monetization efforts across CBS Interactive's 25+ brands that span popular categories like technology, entertainment, sports, news, gaming, among many others. He also consistently launched industry-leading products such as CBS Access to all subscription services and the 24/7 digital news network, including CBSN Access, interactive brands, which includes CBS.com, CBSSports.com, CBSNews.com, CNET, GameSpot, and TVGuide.com. Mr. Lanzone joined CBS Interactive from Clipper Media Inc., where he was co-founder and chief executive officer, which was acquired by CBS in 2011. Prior to Clipper, Mr. Lanzone was CEO of Ask.com, a top 10 global web property and leading search engine, acquired by Interactive Corp. in 2005. Mr. Lanzone holds a BA from UCLA and a JD from Emory University. We're very excited to have Mr. Lanzone here as our keynote speaker. Thank you so much.
That was quite an introduction, and I know that we absolutely want to make plenty of time to talk about what you're doing now. But this being an entrepreneurship summit, we'd like to maybe start with your entrepreneurial journey going back to the very beginning. It scares me, and maybe it scares you a little bit, that these guys were maybe 2 at the height of the .com, but I wonder if you could take us back there, perhaps a little bit of time travel, and let us know sort of what was going on in the macro environment, what was going on in your personal environment that led you to start eToro?
It was hallucinatory for the whole economy. I was telling my son about this, and he's like, that should be a movie. The original .com boom and crash was definitely, it was like the current cryptocurrency boom, except 10 times crazier, and the entire country was part of it, including a group of students from Venezuela. So, I got into it because, so I was the last, so my first year in the business school was the last year in the old building. And my second year was the first year that that we were in this new building. And that summer in between, I interned for a really prehistoric technology company, or internet digital company here in Atlanta. And I was kind of the only person who had product experience online in the class. One of my classmates came back from that summer, Roger Barnett, who's still here in Atlanta, with this business idea and the promise of funding. And so he and I and another classmate became CFO. Roger's CEO, I was the product founder. And then Jennifer Bonet, who's our CTO, she's the head of ATDC now. We just were crazy enough to think that we could start a company. So by the time I graduated in spring of '98, we already had, I think, over $1 million in funding, which for that time was a lot, and 15 employees in an office. And I was taking 3 classes here and 3 in the law school to try to graduate, which I can't believe I did. And we were off to the races.
We were able to find an eToro commercial online, so I
guess you should see.
You should see.
What it does. Maybe this
It's a little grainy, but it'll give them the sensible.
It was not a Super Bowl. Did anyone here see? This is how long ago it was. Did you ever hear of a product called Stumble Upon? You know that? All right, they copied us. That was our Web 0.0 90s company was Stumble Upon before Stumble Upon. The founder of Stumble Upon, I'm friends with, then went on to found Uber. So there were roots in all this, but we, it was a crazy time. We wound up doing these TV ads. Because in the Web 1.0 days, that's what you did. You raised a ton of money and you spent it. Like people were doing television ads and Super Bowl ads. Oh my God, we were buying Wall Street Journal ads for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we raised over $50 million for that startup, and we were a really top 100 website during that time. And then the market crashed really, really hard. And so we essentially went on fumes for the next year. But those 3 years that we were building that company and raising all that money and hiring, there was a time. Is Bones still here at that steakhouse? I still remember being there, and it turned out the bartender had shares of our company. And I was like, this has gotten out of control. Like, how did that even happen? That was that time. Oh yeah, it crashed hard. The whole economy crashed hard. The whole .com boom crashed hard. We crashed along with it. And it was tough. As hard as it was for 3 people or 4 of us who had literally no experience in business. We were young. We had no track record. We were in Atlanta, trying to raise money out of Silicon Valley, which was tough. And we bootstrapped this thing into something where we possibly could have gone public. And as hard as that was, it was harder to do the wind down phase where we had to lay off half the company and go on fumes for 9 months until we sold it to Ask Jeeves, which was which had done its own version of the crash. But that turned out to be, just an incredible other experience.
I totally want to ask you about Ask Jeeves, but before we get there, I'm just wondering, that was really your first entrepreneurial venture.
Well, it always was my first job. I transferred here from law school. I was a river guide in college. I worked in a bookstore. I never really, had a real job before I did that.
In retrospect, are there some lessons you learned that way that you might want to spare these people from learning the hard way?
There is no learning the hard way. I mean, if you're, a lot of companies, Y Combinator has kind of professionalized this, but a lot of companies start as business plans and competitions like this and start at grad school and come out of people thinking, oh, what if we did that? And then actually just go put some meat on the bones of putting a plan together to go do it. And then it's never going to be easy if you've never done it before to raise money. It definitely was not for us. But there are all these backstories of how we had it and lost it and got screwed and we launched anyway. And, it turned out people really loved the product. And then all of a sudden people were trying to give us money, which was a whole different story. Any way you do it, you just have to get going. We had no business starting it. We were sitting right where you guys are now. No business starting it. And by the way, it didn't work out. That's the other thing. It didn't work out, but it got me the experience. I was doing these ads. I didn't have any business doing a television campaign, but I was managing one of the biggest ad agencies in the world, and it's amazing how the world works. That what's 19 years later, or 18 years later from when we did that, I'm now working with the creative director of that ad on ads for a product that we just launched a month ago at CBS. But I was making a website, doing all the banner ads to promote the website, doing all the PR to get the word out, hiring, firing, managing, all those things. And I would say, first of all, there's no better experience than starting a company, and this is no offense to any of my classmates or people who did other stuff, but a lot of people were going into more sure things of jobs, and there's nothing like doing a startup where you just have to get your hands dirty in every part of the company. And so I would just say you just have to get going and just have guts and do it.
So tell us a little bit about the post-fumes phase when we went with Ask Jeeves.
Well, it's funny because at one point in time I would have talked for an hour about it, but I'll give you the quick version it is also hard for anybody as young as you to remember because you've grown up in a world of just Google. But in the 90s, there were like 20 search engines, and they were all public, and there was no business model. They literally had banner ads slapped all over them. When I got to Ask, there were 17 different ads on the search results page. And, Lycos, Hotbot, Yahoo, Northern Light, Alta Vista, LookSmart, InfoSeek. These were all search engines that people use, and they were all public. Ask Jeeves was one of them. Even then, probably didn't have the best reputation in the world, as being a great product. And it had gone from a $10 billion valuation at its peak down to under $100 million when I joined. I think over half the company had been laid off. But what they had, first of all, they had a new president who bought our company and liked me and moved me back out to California, where I'm from. I was from San Francisco, and he moved me back out there to be the head of product. But we had a lot of users. And so two lucky things happened. We gave them a good product, and so even though Ask Jeeves wasn't Google and didn't have the best reputation in the world, we had a lot of people coming to our website every day. This is pre-mobile. And so we used data, and we figured out exactly what it was to give our users the heroin shot to kind of get them addicted to our product and keep them coming back. And then the most amazing thing happened in 2001, 2002. Search developed the best business model of all time. And so we could slide that right in there alongside our users, and 3 years later we sold for we got back up to $3 billion valuation, which in those days was really good. The market was still pretty depressed, and we sold for I think 2.5 to Barry Diller and IAC, or then it was so good that my boss, our CEO, got hired by Microsoft to run the entire internet division of Microsoft. And I became CEO when we left at the time.
So that probably didn't happen by accident. What do you think it was about you and the way you were running your business?
Product. I think in most internet companies, product management is the hub of the company. And even when people don't report to you, you are responsible for everything that happens, with the company. You're the hub, everybody is a spoke, whether it's in marketing or finance or especially, engineering, and you're quarterbacking everything that's going on. So, I think the natural lineage, and I do this in my own company where I have 20 different brands and they all have general managers. The head of product for all those things is normally, not always, but normally kind of next in line for that progression, because they're the ones pulling the levers on everything that's happening, at least for internet companies. Well, it's funny, when we were bought, we had gotten the product so good that Walt Mossberg, who was the big technology reviewer for the Wall Street Journal, was calling us better than Google, and we really had a renaissance on the user experience side, a lot of which I would say is the modern search engine. A lot of the front end of that is what we were doing. We didn't have the great ingredients that Google had of having a data center in every single city across the world. We didn't have as robust of ingredients, but we were really good chefs with what we had, and so the legacy of Ask 2.0, right, the one that we ran as kind of the turnaround team, I think is really a big part of what you all use every day in search. Certainly, all the features of a search engine that go beyond just the 10 blue links, that was what we really focused on. So any widgets in the page, all those things, that was our, we really pioneered all of that. But after I left in 2008, we'd gone through a period where, and just so you guys know, Interactive Corp, has someone ever heard of it? So they own Tinder. But over the years, they owned Expedia, Match.com, and LendingTree, and all these different internet companies. It's kind of a conglomerate of internet companies. And so his buying, the theory was we had a great product that just needed to market better. It turned out that really, as big as we got, and at one point we had 6% of the total search market, which is actually a pretty lucrative place to be. The Google freight train was happening. It was tough. So it eventually transitioned into a really big business. I mean, billions of revenue, but still small relative to Google, and it's still out there making money. But it had its 20-year run, but it's not what it was at the time.
So you left in 2008, and then is it correct you were like an entrepreneur in residence?
Yeah, I mean, it was and hopefully a lot of you will be in the situation where you sell a company. That's a great moment. A lot of great things happen with that. But if you do, and then you're the person who has to then run the company, you have to realize that it's not your house anymore. And if somebody wants to paint it pink, it's their decision to paint it pink. Just because you live there,
so pink wasn't
you can't. Yeah, I mean, I definitely have my own opinions on what we need to be doing, and I would say, it was kind of a rough ending to what was a real golden years period where, we kind of got divorced in a pretty ugly way when I left. So when I left, I always had an open invitation to go be an entrepreneur residence at a venture capital firm with one of the board members of Ask, and so that's how I ended up there. So really what I was doing was going around and looking at what my next thing should be and incubating ideas.
So that's what I'm really interested in. At that particular moment, did you self-identify as an entrepreneur?
No, and I had offers to be public company CEO again, and I turned it down to start Clear. So I stared a lot of money and other things in the face and did what theoretically could have been the stupidest thing I ever did in my life, and instead I went and raised a bunch of money for a company to build a company from scratch. The story there is everybody knows who Sheryl Sandberg is, who's an old friend of mine, but her husband Dave, who passed away a couple years ago, was a very close friend of mine, and he was in EIR that summer of 2008 at a different VC firm. We would meet all the time, and one of the ideas that we had was that video was beginning to explode. Hey, the TV guide of the future is going to be a search engine, and somebody should build that. And so we would meet every Monday at Starbucks, and we'd talk about this idea, which originally was his idea, and eventually he wanted to go down the pathway of buying SurveyMonkey, which one of my best friends and classmates from here, Xander Lurie, now runs, so I think you're all going to see next month. And And so Dave bossed SurveyMonkey, and he gave me the green light to go ahead and pursue our idea of a video search engine, which we eventually launched in 2009.
So that was your second go around.
Yeah.
What was the same? What was different?
Well, this time I was given $8 million from Bill Gurley, who was one of the best VCs in Silicon Valley. And had a team I could kind of call back out of the woods to, I'd already built a search engine and ran it for 6 years, so I knew exactly who the right people were. A couple of whom, by the way, were people from Atlanta who had worked for me at my startup. Actually, one of whom worked for me as an intern at that first internet company that I was an intern at. He was an undergrad, I was grad school. And he is now still with me. He's a VP of product at CBS Interactive.
I hope
today.
you guys are listening.
So 20 years later, he's still working for me.
Internships.
But yeah, so I mean, that part was easier. The harder part was I was better known. Everybody was like, "What are you doing now?" And I had to stay in stealth for a year while we built this thing, and it was terrifying. It was more terrifying because I had a lot to lose. I had 3 kids and a mortgage and I turned down other things to do it, but I tell this to people, and this is the other thing about being an entrepreneur, is I've had people in my office passionately tell me their great idea that I think is a terrible idea. But you can see the look in their eye where they think the world needs this product. And that is who should build a company. When you are so passionate about it, you don't care if it doesn't work, if you lose everything, if the world needs this thing that you feel so passionate about. That's the moment you should do it. The truth is, only 1 out of 1,000 companies is going to work. We were very lucky. Even in the first time when we pretty much went out of business, that we found a home for it, and it still survived. Selling our company was a really fortunate thing. The second time, it's not likely to happen. But that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? And so that's why I went and did it. I was that passionate about the idea. So
what was the secret sauce of Clicker?
Well, first thing is, in this instance, I'd say my first company, the idea was fairly niche. In the second instance, the truth is, it was the right idea, and it was really early. 2008 was pre-Hulu. It hadn't launched yet. It launched right when we got our funding announced. The other thing that happened was the market crashed again. So that was the other thing. That was the other thing that made that hard. I mean, literally it crashed October 2008, right after I did the handshake to take that $8 million. But by the way, we did it the hard way. We launched. Okay, so everybody watches Silicon Valley. Yeah. We launched it. You've heard of TechCrunch Disrupt. Back then it was called TechCrunch 50. Even though I've been through it, and most people there were launching brand new companies and they'd never done anything before, I launched there and stood on stage just like everybody else and pitched it. I did, but Sarah Lacey wrote an article in TechCrunch that said, "Is Jim Lanzone a jerk?" And it wasn't because I was a jerk, it was because I had already raised money and I was already established, and why would I do it? There's a lot of reasons why I wound up doing it, but that was terrifying too. But yeah, right in the heart of that. But the biggest secret sauce is I had a team. I had great people, and we knew exactly what we wanted to build, which is when you know exactly what that product should be, you have that purity of thought. I mean, it's so much easier. And we knew for that year we were going to stealth exactly what we wanted to build. And again, it turned out it was probably a little bit too early, but at that time, the whole world was turning its attention to internet television. So when we sold CBS, we had 3 companies that were trying to buy us. So we hit the market timing actually pretty well.
And that's what I was going to ask you. It's not particularly typical to go from launch to sale in 16 months.
Yeah.
Did you ever in your wildest dreams have that in mind?
Well, look, it's not only a positive sign that we sold that early either, right? If you have Uber or Airbnb and you have a tiger by the tail in 16 months, I think we eyeballed it and said, look, we have a really good offer, probably worth more than it's probably better than we're worth at this point. And so, we had to make that decision. Do you take the money now, or do you just keep raising more money and going for it? So no, I wasn't prepared for it. The decision point then was, do you raise $30 million and really just triple down on the idea. And we could already see at that point, Bill Gurley had a great quote at the time. He said, this is sport of kings, trying to distribute and control access to content that you don't own. It's owned by all the big television companies. So I think we were probably a little naive in what we were building. I think the product was great, and it would be very useful to be able to get to any single piece of content on the video content on the internet, know exactly where it's playing, whether you have a subscription, a universal queue for that. The truth is, everybody, Hulu, Netflix, they were like, no. You're not having access to that data. So we knew, at that point it was probably best to do it.
So there wasn't too much angst around.
No, I think we felt pretty lucky to have 3 companies come after us at that point.
So that pretty much brings us to the current day, or at least the start of the current era. Having been sort of such a successful entrepreneur and now having a very important corporate job, how do you see yourself? What skill sets matter the most to you?
It's the same skill set. I get a team of any size and we move. We know what we want to build and we're not happy with where things are today, even if they're going really well. And we move everybody towards the next thing. And if at a search engine that was essentially, again, pre-mobile, so forgive me, but I would always say it was a 3-page website. It's the one with the search box, it's the results page, and it's the one that you go to. And now, I have 25 different brands, most of which are content companies, and so it's millions of them. It's the same thing. It's about getting a great team, getting great people in every position that you need them in, and then my job has always been the source of energy and momentum and quality and things not being good enough and pushing. That's always been my thing from the fall of '97, early '98 when we were putting that startup together, and it's what I do today. And to be honest, it's interesting is I've spent half my career doing startups and half running top 10 internet companies and that are part of public companies, and I just have never seen them as being as different as people do from the outside.
It's really interesting because there's a lot of people who hold out the belief that the people who are equipped to build a company are not necessarily the same ones equipped to
That's all about the person. And in some cases, Reid Hoffman doesn't want to be the CEO. He hires this guy before Jeff Weiner, but then Jeff Weiner to run it for him. In other cases, CEO gets kicked out by the board because they're just not capable of running a bigger operation. So maybe in that way it's a little bit different. But I come at it from that entrepreneurial product point of view. I think if my team were here, they would all say the same thing.
So that nimbleness has been pretty important. So you've been at CBS, 7 years?
Just past 7 years. Which Ben was making fun of me for saying that's not that long.
So what's
in internet years, it's like a long
time. Or tell us about internet years. I read somebody said something to you about how old you were in internet years.
Oh, geez. I can imagine what that is. Well, that's the other thing that's funny is like in the media world, I'm still on the young end. In Silicon Valley, they would put you out to pasture 47.
Well, what has changed in 7 years at CBS and your role of CBS Interactive?
Well, the 2 things that have not changed are content and Les Moonves as my boss, being the king of content. Everything in the digital side has changed. So when I started, we were kind of in some ways the hinterlands of the company. It was really they wanted us to hit our numbers, but didn't want us to mess things up for the main event. And now 7 years later, we're the focus. The world's becoming digital. Les himself says we are now a multi-platform company creating premium content, distributing it wherever users want to consume it. And that had not really begun. There was CBS.com at the time, and CBS is being the #1 network then, and now it's like people would still go there to watch, but it just was not the robust digital strategy and digital focus of the company that it is today.
So it's a complex thing
Well,
that...
we weren't even on the iPad at that point, which launched in 2010. 2011 I joined, there was no iPad, and that was the first thing. Can we get on the iPad? We had to prove that for a year before we really did it. So when I started, 6% of our traffic was mobile, if you can believe it. In 2011, it feels like it was yesterday to everybody that you can't imagine a world where you're not consuming all this content on your phone. Only 6% of our traffic was mobile, so mostly desktop. You fast forward to 2018, our fastest growing source of traffic for watching our videos across entertainment, sports, news, everything is the television. Like, we're now through mobile being the shiny new object. It's back to the biggest trend is TV itself, and the way that they're getting there is through these internet-connected devices, like Roku or Apple TV, Chromecast, Apple Fire Stick. It's not the majority of our users, but it's quickly becoming the majority of our viewership online.
So you brought a few videos. Did you want to?
Well, we could do it when it's up. It's to kind of talk about some of the things I'm most proud of building from scratch are things that we've done at CBS within a larger company. And not all of you are going to build companies from scratch. You're going to be within big companies. And my thing for all of you is first of all, I could give the career advice I give my own people. We can set that aside for now. But is building is something that's absolutely possible within a larger company, including a public company. In our case, we have to be we do everything profitably. We're not just burning money at both ends like a lot of technology companies, and we have responsibilities on that end. And yet, we've been able to build things that are super impactful and are the future of our company across the major categories that we operate in. So the first of which is CBS All Access, which is our subscription product. It's most similar to Netflix or Hulu. When I got there in 2011, I still had the budget deck, which is really the annual business plan, and it's on like page 50 and bottom right corner, and it essentially says one day if we can do all these 25 things, one day we will have a subscription product, and then if that all works, one day we'll have our own original programming, which we just last year launched for the first time, most notably with the new Star Trek. So that is CBS All Access. We're now a few shows into. We've done the Good Wife sequel. We've done a comedy with Will Ferrell called No Activity. We just announced we're developing the new Twilight Zone with Jordan Peele, and it just didn't get out, which we call the pilot for the new Twilight Zone. We're a bunch of our own dramas. I was just in Pittsburgh visiting the set of one of our new dramas that we're doing. So that's, that we can talk about why that product has worked and what it is, but that first clip is just some of the things we've done so far.
So early.
Oh yeah, it's the
Star Trek Discovery has received critical acclaim.
Has anyone watched this?
Years truly binge-worthy shows. Right, it's showtime.
Good, you better sit this.
I'm responsible for forging my own destiny. We all are.
Star Trek Discovery, now streaming exclusively on CBS All Access.
This is a nightmare. I'm broke and out of a job, but...
Did anyone watch The Good Wife? This is the sequel to The Good Wife. Does anyone watch The Good Fight?
people have all these things. Diane's got something to prove and she's after good then.
Hey, it's $6 a month.
I got my money back.
The Good Fight, now streaming exclusively on CBS All Access.
We're on surveillance. We sit here for hours and hours and hours and nothing ever happens.
Keep turning, keep stop. That's your best side.
Okay. We're actually digging a hole. I thought it was code for something.
What would that be code for?
Something not like hole digging. Act like I'm not here. Cool.
So the
CBSN.
oh, we can wait on this.
You want to hold off here?
Yeah, well, we can hold. So okay, so does anyone want to watch Star Trek but has not wanted to pay for CBS All Access?
That's
That's the number one complaint. The number one complaint is that they have to pay for an additional service. But what's funny is between CBS All Access and Showtime over the top, which we also run, we have about 5 million subscribers now. So we're a little bit behind Amazon, Hulu, and Netflix, but we're the 4th largest overall subscription service online from pretty much from scratch. So it's been a big part of what we've done.
So music, sports.
So the other one is all of the divisions of CBS needed to kind of come along into the digital future. And so we, several years ago, about 3 years ago, we started planning to launch our own, essentially cable news channel, 24/7 streaming news channel, online only. And we saw this OTT future happening, but we also didn't own a cable station. We didn't have CNN or MSNBC or anything like that would be disrupted by building one online. Meanwhile, we already had 40 million users a month at cbsnews.com. So we had an audience, we had the technology and the product, and CBS News, in 60 Minutes, it's the most Emmy award-winning group. And we said, look, we have Holly Williams embedded in Syria 24 hours a day for years. We have people at the White House, we have people in China, and they're only doing the reports for a minute in the morning and a minute at night. What if you could take all that content and turn it into a 24/7 streaming channel? So that became CBSN, which is now the #1 streaming news channel on all those different devices. So this one, again, from scratch, but this is what that looks like.
The biggest stories, live breaking news, video you control. Anytime, anywhere, CBSN. CBS News, always on.
And then we can let that one go. I'll show you that one. So then, just a month ago, we launched the exact same basic concept, but in sports.
Hey, welcome to the future, folks. We call it CBS.
This is the minute it launched.
I'm Chris Hassel. He's Dallin Cup. Never hyperbolic. I like that. Here on CBS Sports HQ, 24/7 highlights, news, information. Of course, we'll have a lot of fun along the way. Of course. Stream it online whenever you want. Download the CBS Sports app in the Watch tab. We're always right there. You cannot miss it. Let's roll. NBA, streaking, Rockets. That's where we're going to start things off.
Yeah, we actually want you to be on your phone.
Watch it on your phone, your tablet, anything, and watch James Harden go
Right,
to town.
so the premise here-
on the Denver Nuggets.
We can
going for its
move
12th
on.
straight victory. Harden on
So
fire
the
in first
the
quarter.
premise here of this was same thing. We have the resources of CBS Sports. We have the #2 overall digital sports property with CBS Sports Digital, which is several sports properties, but we're #2 behind ESPN online. And we don't really have anything that's to disrupt. And meanwhile, in our view, ESPN had moved very strongly away from sports news and highlights and much more towards entertainment. A lot of talking heads yelling at each other, a lot of variety shows, but it would be hard. There are 4 ESPN channels, and at any given time, if you go, maybe none of them are showing highlights, but we thought that was a really big need for sports viewers. So we built the 24/7 streaming sports news and highlights channel. At different points today was streaming the Masters as well, but so you can get more, but that was the premise here. When it launched the first week, it was 4 times larger than the first week of CBSN, the news app. So these are all multi-year, very expensive, very labor-intensive, entrepreneurial, from scratch things that we've built even within a really big company. And then it turns out, if you rewind a few years, thank God, because the digital future, obviously is happening very, very fast for our company, and we're now being able to lay the foundation for the next 50 years.
So you're a disruptor. Do you have your eye on anything you can share with us in terms of what else might have some momentum?
Well, this plan of valuing and seeing the importance of OTT, what I call OTT, which is again the Roku, Apple TV type of ways back to the big screen. We're emboldened by this. So these have gone so well that we're building one right now for entertainment, behind the Entertainment Tonight brand. So I don't know what we'll call it. We can't call it Entertainment Tonight today. It has to be something unique. And yeah, I mean, we're looking at expanding that look for local versions, for news and other categories, and we're very passionate behind it. And then the other thing is just doing more on the core CBS side. We're doing more and more original shows, and we're going very quickly down that path as well.
So things are going really well. What keeps you up at night?
Well, look, at my job now, and I think we didn't necessarily mention, when we sold the company, I took the job as CEO of Interactive. So we're, in any given month, we're the 6th or 7th largest overall internet company. We're right behind Amazon. And we kind of go back and forth with Apple and Comcast. And so the way we get there is we're a conglomerate of all these different properties. We also run GameSpot, and it's the number one video game site. CNET's the number one technology site, and all these different ones in different categories in food and music and others. And so I essentially run a conglomerate of websites, which is different. There's not really any other job like it. In my first 4 years, we also had 2,000 employees and 15 properties in China. So that came through the CNET. They bought CNET in 2008, which was a public company. So I was going to China once every quarter, and I was the only American CEO of a Chinese internet company. So I was doing a lot of that, but we sold that in 2015. So I'd say 75% of my job is people. It's not only getting them and then it's keeping them and then managing them the right way. It's my favorite thing to do is product development and design and building things, and so I still get to do some fun things like that. And now I get to read scripts, and I've become a Hollywood guy somehow. But only as a product. Like even in our world, I always say the content is a feature. It's not the same thing as just having a channel that's going to be there no matter what, and putting the best thing on that can retain people. It's one of the things that we do to attract people to our properties, and then there's lots of things we have to do to keep them there, to monetize them, and others. So there's always something. And then I also have corporate responsibilities across CBS and the digital side of that. So between the two, it's a lot.
Ben, who taught you, Jeff Rosenzweig, who just came in, who taught you.
Jeff?
Julie Barefoot, who admitted you, and
we wrote a book together. Yeah. He wrote the book. I just held it. I just looked at it.
I wanted to editorialize that. Jim, one reason I came.
It's good to see you.
But also I remember you so well. And why I asked you to help on my book. And the reason I'm editorializing for you is Jim was so creative, and also, as you know, was not afraid to let his sense of humor show, and he had a great sense of humor, and that's why I'm here. And I remember you. I teach 300 students a year, so I think he's an example too of let your individuality show a little bit, and creativity is always valuable, and let your sense of humor show a little bit. Look how many BBAs we have. How are you going to stand out? How are you going to differentiate yourself? Jim is talented, of course. That's why I asked him to help me on the book. But
Ben never asked me that.
He's an individual, and that
you were my TA.
So I hope you use him as a role model that way.
Well, I say this with love amongst my peers, but our demo does not matter anymore. So where I started to go with this is we are the old guard. What are the insights about providing entertainment that this generation will want to consume, and in fact will soon be creating themselves?
So I'll flip it around and say you do matter, and they don't matter as much right now, because in their age group, historically, I found this out by doing the research on it. And if you think back to your time at that age, you consumed media, but you were much more focused on your social life. And in our generation, it was talking on the phone that had a wire attached to it. And you watched television for sure, but as you aged into high school, college, grad school, it was much less often. So people graduated into longer form programming. They graduated into more hours watched in media. So you're saying we have no life, so we and you have purchasing power. And so it's all right. The great thing that's happened is that for their age group is you know, again, if you were a Gen X or whatever, you had to go to bars, you had to do it, you know, you have other ways to communicate now, and a lot of the attention is spent on that communication. That's what Snapchat's for, and any kind of communication tool. And really then those companies are trying to be media, right? And they're having some fits and starts at it. And so in our world, it's been pretty gratifying to see advertisers, at first they always go to the shiny new object, right? It's okay, let's just throw money at Snapchat, let's throw it at Twitter. Eventually, they realize that certain kinds of programming have people truly engaged, right? It's not about, in my world, it's not whether you watch something for 3 or 4 seconds, which is how it's measured by a lot of the social media companies with video. It's not on silent, it's not something you scroll past. It's something you engage with for over an hour at a time. And so that has a lot of value up the funnel. And then Google and Facebook and those things, those are direct response, they're capturing you down the funnel. So that's how we think about it. But clearly, I mean, we're programming for all different devices and for different age groups, etc. So it's all relevant. But for us, it's about that growth line and whether we keep growing in the future. I mean, it really is all it's about.
So I'd like to open it up for a few minutes for questions. Do we have any?
Yep.
Hi, thank you for the insights you offer. So you mentioned people and team, both in your entrepreneurship journey and in your day-to-day responsibilities at CBS. So I'm curious, what are the biggest takeaway you get from managing your team at the startup that you find transferable and valuable in your day-to-day management of your team at CBS?
So what it was I learned about people at the startup that transferred to the larger company world. The first thing to think about it, the products I was building in a startup are not that different from the products I'm building for a larger company. It's still a product team that's the what, an engineering team that's the how. They collaborate on the what and how. If you have a good team, and if you're a good product manager, everybody feels like they got due process, and even if you don't listen to them at the end of the day. You still have to get the word out there, you still have to make money and manage your expenses, you know what I mean? So all those things are similar. The scale is different. But one thing I've always thought is it's a lot easier to manage 4,000 people on one thing than it is to manage 40 people across 40 things. It's just more resources to go after the thing that you wanted. The thing that I always look for in people are, they have to be true subject matter experts. Now you can work your way up to becoming one, and then great. It doesn't matter how many years it took you. It doesn't matter where you came from. I've taught people for product out of almost every other group in the company, but they've kind of had to prove it over time. Who are not political, who put productivity over politics, who put winning over themselves, who really understand what we're going after. A lot of people just implore you never to be this person who try to navigate your way through an organization by messing with other people or trying to set things up for yourselves versus achieving what the company's out to get to or going after. I'm a very good filter for that. I have a really good radar for those kinds of people, and I can move them out of the way pretty quickly if they're in the way. And then I set them up for success, right? If I'm out there trying to get us to that point, then everybody's got to follow along with me to try to achieve it, right? I'm not rewarding people for that kind of behavior. Business school, by the way, is a great opportunity for changing paths, right? A lot of people show up here having done one thing, and it's one of the values I think of business school is that you can actually now shift, and you have a license to kind of try something different, because I do think people kind of can get stuck sometimes. But there's not one aptitude, there's not one thing you're great at. I mean, Ben didn't ask me to help because I'm not that technical, but for 20 years I've managed technical people, right? And I think we beat Google a lot of the time because they were so one-dimensional about what they wanted. They wouldn't hire people from certain schools. They wouldn't hire right-brain thinkers who were Steve Jobs always talked about that combination of liberal arts and technology. That is where the magic happens, and I do think other companies have suffered in Silicon Valley from not valuing that. But I don't think there's one set of skills. It's more someone who's resourceful, appreciates what winning looks like and helps you go after it.
That was apparently a really great question.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Yes, sir.
You mentioned you were from the Bay Area. How would you compare Atlanta from a tech talent sourcing funding versus the Bay Area?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'll start here. I think so. The Bay Area is amazing. But it's reached this point where, especially in San Francisco proper, which when I was growing up, I grew up 5 minutes from Stanford. That was not Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley was down by San Jose, and we were like, we were firefighters and policemen, and it wasn't the same thing, My parents' 1,800 square foot house, where the guy next door, literally the house is this far away, is now worth like $3 million, where I grew up. They moved before it became worth it. But I mean, that's what's happening. It's crazy. It's so expensive. It's so competitive with the free meals I just had somebody get picked off for almost twice as much as they were making with us. So one of my strategies for that is, and why of my 2,700 people, about 600 are now in San Francisco, is I've moved people out. Like, we have a big engineering team in Louisville, Kentucky, Nashville, Tennessee. Our whole sports group is run out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, because there was a public company that was bought in 2005, was located there. LA is now our fastest growing location, and I've always thought that Atlanta is like the sleeping giant on the technology front, because there's so many big companies here, so much technical talent, really good, obviously, managerial talent, I think, as well, with all those companies, great schools. And I don't know, it's been so interesting to me. I just sat down for drinks with my co-founder from the eTour days in San Francisco a couple months ago, and I would just say it's funny. I don't think Atlanta's come as far as maybe it could as a technology hub. Jen's trying to do great things at ATDC, and it's further than it was when we were starting. Right, when we were starting, it was us and WebMD, and Jeff Arnold, the founder of WebMD, was our chairman, it was kind of, I guess it was more than that. I mean, you had,
I don't know.
What was the name of the big enterprise company?
ISS.
You had. But there weren't as many. And today, I mean, I don't know, in some ways there may even be fewer that I can name off the top of my head. Given the base of talent here, I'm shocked by that. One way you will know, and LA is the biggest culprit of this, they're always touting, oh, look at LA, yay for LA, we finally made it, now we're as big as them. It's like, you'll know you're there when you don't say that, right? And celebrate it all the time, you just do it. But remember, great companies are coming out of Salt Lake City, Seattle, Portland, tech companies, everywhere. It literally does not matter. And there's enough technical talent here to do it here. It doesn't have to be anywhere else.
And clearly enough business.
By the way, the VCs know that too. And before Gurley was doing my startup, and well before Uber, he was going to Indianapolis. He was going to all kinds of places he was on the board, right? So the smart VCs know that. It's you catch a tiger by the tail with your product, the VCs will be all over you no matter where you are. I promise.
Okay, one last question. Going once.
I have a question.
Of course you do.
Good doctor.
It's time. Andrea, are these mostly seniors? I see some juniors.
There are everybody from executive MBAs and people in the community to juniors. I don't know. Do I have any sophomores? A couple of brave sophomores.
Jim, one thing I asked some of the most successful grads we've had year one, but a lot of it was when he became a prime minister, is what did you take away from Gazweda that was most valuable? What should they be locking in before they leave Gazweda so they don't lose what could have been valued? Should they build a brain trust amongst the smartest people that they know here? That would be very interesting.
And by the way, just to be careful, Gazweda or Emory College, we're very happy to have our Emory College.
Both great. Well, look, a small one, for me personally, coming from law school, right, was, and I was a political science major undergrad. I was joking earlier when I took the GMAT to try to get in here. Thank you, Julie Barefoot. I hadn't taken math in 7 years. I mean, it was like, and so taking accounting, understanding that side of it. To tell you the truth, I remember the HR class. I tell you, I had never really worked in a real company before. And if I wasn't the best student in that HR class, I was right up there, never having worked. And it taught me that I could do it. I knew what I was doing, and it was, if you had good logic, and in Sundar's marketing class and these other classes, like I could do it. So on a personal level, there was that. On a practical level, from the professors and the faculty to my classmates, obviously it was definitely people. And I don't mean it in a cheesy networking way, because again, I smell those people out. Don't be those cheesy networking people. But you got to get out there and do it naturally and get to know people, because it's all about experience. And especially for the BBAs, I would just say, if I could go back, even if I didn't go to business school, if I went back, it's just about getting experience, just getting started, doing one thing, seeing where that leads, seeing what people you meet. Every year you're in school, I'd say, is another opportunity to not only learn new things, meet new people, but I would really be putting an emphasis on summer jobs, keeping jobs through the school year. A lot of people want smart people. If you kind of hook in somewhere, just keep it on the side and keep doing it. All that experience, again, even if you switch disciplines, if you start in sales and you wind up in product, or you wind up in finance, or you start in finance and you don't want to go that way, it all leads to that next thing, and that experience winds up being, I think, the most important thing, because it also teaches you that you can do it. I gave one of the commencement speeches at UCLA this year, and they have like 100 of them. It wasn't like I wasn't a prime minister giving it. There's like 10 of them for all the different schools. It's such a big school. But my biggest thing that, as I looked back, was I never thought I could do. I never necessarily thought, oh, I'm going to nail this. I can do it. I can start a company. It's going to work. But what I said was, but I never thought I couldn't. And because I would always put myself out there to go after things that people maybe would stop themselves from doing. So that's my other big thing, is just don't think you can't do it, and then you're going to put yourself out there and maybe it will.
I was going to ask you for a last word of advice, but unless you have another
that's
one,
it.
that sounds
absolutely
phenomenal. We have a small token for you, and for the rest of you, I hope very much to see you here tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us.